Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. Today's episode is called Inclusify with special guest Dr. Stefanie K. Johnson. Stefanie is the director of the Center for Leadership and a professor of management at the University of Colorado Boulder, my alma mater. She writes for popular press outlets, including the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Bloomberg, and she is the author of the Wall Street Journal national bestseller, Inclusify, The Power of Uniqueness and Belonging to Build Innovative Teams. She has lent her expertise to enhance leadership capacity to organizations like the World Economic Forum, NASA, the NFL, and the Conference Board. Welcome, Stefanie.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm excited to be here and go Buffs.
Exactly. I'm so happy you're here because I read your book when it first came out in 2020.
Yeah.
And then I recently reread it again to prepare for our discussion, and the content continues to be an extremely relevant one in leadership circles. I wanted to ask you some initial questions about, what was the genesis of the idea for the book, and what was your aha moment that made you create this book?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it's, in reality, it's something that I just love popular press management books. I think I read them all. I read like 2 books a week.
Me too.
And I think it's just like you always get some little nugget. So I wanted to write one because I love them. But I think that why this content is I worked with many companies, some of the best companies out there in, 2010s who were really focused on increasing diversity and had made great strides through hiring practices to successfully increase the diversity of their talent pool. And they found great results, right? They're getting a ton of benefit from having more diverse talent. But here's the kicker, they were losing them at higher rates than their majority group talent. And so this is like suddenly becoming a less good investment, right? Because it's expensive to replace talent, especially when we're talking about top talent. And so when I worked with these companies and heard this story over and over again, I'm like, well, what are you doing to promote an inclusive environment? And they're like, what are you talking about? At that time, there really was no book out there on the idea of inclusion, actually doing something actively to make the workplace work for everyone. And so I'm like, oh, this is it. This is what I need to write my popular press book on, is just some very basic strategies that leaders can use to create more inclusive workplaces.
And you came up with the term Inclusify.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
Well, the idea behind the word Inclusify is it's supposed to be more of an active term than include. So what's like, if you want to create inclusion, what do? You include people. But as I talk to some of these CEOs and managers, they would say, well, of course we included them. They're here, right? They're included. I'm like, well, that's not really what it means to be inclusive. You need to actually, and so I need a word. So Inclusify, you need to do something active. It's not that people will just naturally feel included if they come work for your company because they're there, right? You have to create an environment where people feel included. And so that's the idea of Inclusify.
I love that. And you have some personal stories about kind of this has greater meaning to you as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think both of us as women and moms, and I'm Mexican American. And so there's, many ways in which I experienced the exact things that I'm talking about, experiencing microaggressions or having to reprove myself much more than other people. And so in, putting the book together, I'm like, I hear these stories from people because a lot of it's qualitative. I, met with leaders and like their direct reports to see what do people say versus what's the experience of their team. And when I started to see all the data, I realized maybe for the first time that this is not, I'm like, that happened to me. I thought that was me, not something that just happened to everyone. And so for me, I thought it was like super validating to have the realization that I'm not the only person who gets talked over in meetings, right? It's like all women, all people of color, all women of color, all non-native English speakers in an English speaking environment get experience the same thing.
One of the stories that you tell in your book is after you got back from maternity leave, you were in your office and you were trying to get some work done. So you shut your door and you heard someone outside your door saying to another colleague, "Oh, she's still out on maternity leave," because he assumed you were gone because the door was closed and you were trying to get work. And you made the point of, it's not, they wouldn't have said that about a man.
That I know. So, and ironically, that was one of the colleagues, like my favorite colleagues. He was like super supportive in every way, and he meant, for sure, no ill intent in
Sure.
making that assumption. But it just occurred to me that, I'm married, I have a husband, and he also had a kid the same day I did. Go figure, right? But he never had that experience that anyone believed he wasn't in the office or he was around less because he had children. And I think that's true for all men. Like people don't assume, oh, he's going to be daddy tracked now on his
Yeah.
career because he's had a child. In fact, the data on parents show that for every child a woman has, she earns less. Whereas for men, it's the opposite. When they have kids, they actually earn more. And I have some, theories and there's some data to say why, but they don't suffer the mom penalty.
Yeah, I did a podcast on the book called Power Moms where we talked a lot about that topic. So it's a very important topic. Um, but one of the things that you, just to kind of, diverge a little bit, you've studied the last 15 years about the intersection between leadership and diversity. What does that mean exactly? And what have you learned? And I know some of these topics are going to start to come up again.
Yeah, for sure. So, now I think it's been 25 years that I've been studying this, and just seeing the changes is so interesting. So I think some things that are, just foundational things to understand is that for diversity to achieve its success in the workplace, we know that having diverse perspectives and different viewpoints, having people like you're a marketer, having marketing people whose demographics mirror your customers' demographics, improve
Absolutely.
outcomes, right? But not always. So initially, I would say when I started doing this research, like no one talked about this. And then there was hey, this can actually be beneficial. Identity, gender, race, ability matters for something, right? It can be beneficial. But then there was like, no, it doesn't always benefit you. And then I would say the most up-to-date research says diversity has a positive impact on outcomes, whatever they are, stock prices, when their environment is inclusive. So you're actually able to put a spotlight on or lend a microphone to those diverse perspectives, you get the benefit. If you don't have an environment that supports everyone to have their voices heard, you don't get the benefits. And in fact, you don't get benefits, but there's also reasons that diversity slows things down, right? That you can create more conflict. It's sometimes easier to make decisions when everyone's the same. They're not the best decisions, but they're easy, right? So today, I would say, I think everyone agrees that there is a real benefit to diversity for individuals, companies, and definitely for society. If you look at the World Economic Forum's data,
Yeah.
yet you need to make sure you have inclusive leadership to realize all those benefits.
Let's talk a little bit about stats, and going back to the, where we were in 2020 as to where we are today in 2024. When you wrote this book, there were 5% of women as leaders of Fortune 500 companies. The number has risen to 10%.
Yeah,
It's not a huge number. We'll take it.
yeah,
But these numbers are more challenging for people of color. What are your thoughts on some of those numbers and the progress that we've made over the last 4 years?
yeah. So, I think if you look at the Fortune 500, it's 10%. That doesn't feel great. It's, 50 women. If you look at all companies, really 1 in 4 C-suite leaders are women. But as you point out, Kelly, so astutely, that number is only 1 in 16 for women of color.
Yeah.
So we still have a long way to go. And I don't know how you felt in the last couple years, but I feel like any inch toward progress, I think it is progress, right? We should, maybe the demographics of companies should mirror those of society, like just naturally.
Yes.
But anytime some progress is made, it seems like there's overwhelming backlash from, certain segments of the population who feel like someone else's progress is
Sure.
costing them personally. So you see these lawsuits against entrepreneurial angel investors that are funding Black women. They were just sued. There was several, I mean, it's like 13 attorneys general got together and wrote letters to companies who they felt like were using diversity in a discriminatory way and like questioning practices that promote equality, threatening to sue them. To be fair, many more attorneys general wrote a letter back saying like, no, you still have to promote diversity because, any progress does not mean that someone's been engaging in illegal practices. And I'll give you an example, but I wonder, is this just me who's seeing this, or do you feel like you see the
No,
same?
I mean, how many months ago was it that the Supreme Court eliminated race as a checkbox on the application, the college applications,
Yeah,
which has
yeah,
huge implications for colleges trying to attract people of a range of races. So you're absolutely right. There are some things that have started to pull back, let alone the whole women's rights issue, but we won't even go there today.
yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, for sure. But for me, it's interesting. I'll tell you about a project I did with the Hubble Space Telescope Time Allocation Committee. So this is part of NASA, and they had for a long time disparities in the number of men and women principal investigators applying for telescope time. So we're talking about like astrophysicists here.
Yeah.
And if you want to study supernova or black holes, you need to use a telescope. And so you have to apply and you get money, but really the benefit is getting time to answer your research questions. And they had consistently found the male astrophysicists were outperforming the women in terms of getting access to funding and telescope time. And this was their, kudos to them because this was their realization, and they reached out to me to help solve this problem. So I'm not coming in to criticize them. I'm like, okay, you noticed this tiny, it was a small disparity, but it was so consistent.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even in the number of men versus women, it was the percentage, because very few of the applicants are women to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So after like we studied it, we tried different things, and finally we just removed names from applications. So you don't know if it's a female astrophysicist or a male astrophysicist. And in fact, we instructed people not to discuss who it is because it's a small, how many astrophysicists are out there, right? It's a small community. Maybe you can figure it out, but instead we're like, focus on the science. So don't talk about, well, this person, I don't know if they have the expertise. And so they did that at Hubble in the very first cycle. It eliminated all gender bias.
Yeah.
And now they've applied this across NASA. And someone just published a more updated study than mine showing that the effect persists, and it's even greater, that younger scientists and female scientists are getting more access to this. But so that's great, right? Like we can do these interventions. There's no way you can say there's bias in that. We've taken the names off, right?
Yeah.
Yet that decision or, making that change was met with a lot of resistance because we reached out to scientists in the community to get feedback. How would this work? And people said things like, you've basically created a quota system for women to get access to telescope time.
How is that a quota system when there's
How is
no?
it? It's like the opposite of a quota, right? Like,
Yeah.
is the reality, is that person's view that if we removed male privilege, that women are going to get more access? If that is their view, then great, right? Because we want very best scientists who are going to leverage their expertise to create great scientific discovery. It's not, like, so I feel like my point, and I really don't think it came through, but the point is, I think no matter what you do, even if it's the least
You'll be
biased,
criticized.
it's going to be criticized. Yeah.
There's a similar study that gets talked about. It's not even a study; it's actually been executed, whereby national symphonies are having people do their rehearsals in order to enter the symphonies. And they're doing it blind behind a curtain, and they're making them take their shoes off so they can't tell if it's a woman walking in heels or a man. And it has significantly increased the amount of women on national symphonies. So that's
Yeah.
another example.
I know. So that's where we got the idea.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. For the NASA thing, I was like, well, like, what they did in the National Symphony was
Yeah.
we don't even have to remove shoes for this. And so
Yeah.
now if you apply for NASA funding, in almost every directorate, almost every application process, it'll be blind. We call it double blind usually, because you don't know who's reviewing you, and the reviewer doesn't know who the person is, and it's used in a lot of areas of science. But yeah, if it works, like, and I don't think it cures everything. So if, for your listeners, if they're like, oh shoot, why don't we just do that? It'll cure all the problems. It doesn't cure all the problems, because there's also who gets access to PhD programs to even become an astrophysicist, and, who's encouraged to go into STEM fields. And so it's not the ultimate panacea, but if you show that that works, you really have to wonder, like, it's like proof, right? It's proof that there's still bias persisting. And so when people rage against efforts to reduce bias as reverse discrimination, it's like, it's not reverse discrimination. It's just trying to get, like, clear way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on why it's so hard for companies to attract, retain, and engage diverse teams?
Yeah, I think there's so many things. So I don't know if attracting is as difficult. That is, through gender decoding of language, for example, or same thing with race. If you really highlight that your organization focuses on, like, people's ability and their contributions to get ahead, I think you can quickly eliminate deterrence to people applying, right? Sometimes people say women have to meet all of the job requirements to even bother applying.
Yeah.
I think there's truth to that. So you can move more things to the nice to have. Some organizations for internal promotions have switched to automatic application. So everyone who's eligible for this promotion will be entered unless you withdraw yourself.
Yeah.
And they find that then you don't get the gender bias, because women aren't going to go through the effort of, I'm going to take my name off the list. They just don't want to put their name in the list, right?
Yeah.
So I don't feel like that's the problem. I think the problem is that if you have never experienced not feeling included, not feeling like you belong, having microaggressions against you for something, for an accent or whatever it might be, it's hard to understand that perspective, because we're not inherently good. I understand my perspective. I don't understand your perspective, right? And we don't always take the time to really listen and try and see other people's viewpoints. So I think that's the reason we see this higher turnover. It's lack of respect, ability to get ahead, feeling valued. And until we, I think we can fix this through leadership, by having leaders who take the time for their own good, not even for, like, because they want to help others, but just for their own benefit. If those leaders invested in themselves to be more inclusive, they would reap the benefits, because you're only as successful as your team.
Absolutely. And that leads to the topic of unconscious bias. Can you talk a little bit about how do we address unconscious bias, and what are the lessons we need to know
Yeah,
to
it's
move
so
from
hard.
unconscious to conscious bias?
Yeah, because if it's unconscious, how do you know it's happening, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was like with the NASA example, no one thought they were being biased when they were doing the reviews. They would say, no, we're basing it on the science. but because it's unconscious and pervasive, it has, maybe tiny effects, but it's in those tiny margins that we choose who gets into the high potential program, who we tap on the shoulder for a leader development opportunity or a promotion. And what it comes down to is like you have a prototype of what it means to be, a successful marketer. And when people act like or look like or talk like your prototype, you assume that they're going to be successful. And so the way our brains work, if I assume like you're a CU buff, I think you're going to be awesome in every way because you have a great education. I will notice all the things that you do to confirm my pre-existing beliefs.
Sure.
And discount the things that you do that don't affirm what I believe. So how do you deal with that? I think you can make structural changes like take the names off resumes. You can't take the names off everything. So I try to track things. If I have a spreadsheet of who have I given recognition to, who have I given high profile assignments to. And so I can be aware if say I'm not giving any recognition to this one team member. Well, there's two potential problems there. One, I'm biased against them. I'm not noticing the things that they did that are really excellent. Or two, they're just doing a terrible job, right? Either way, it's my job as a manager to be paying attention to that. If they're not doing a good job, it's on me to support them to improve their performance. So you got to follow up and do the work.
Yeah, it's very challenging. You had 3 lessons about moving from unconscious bias to conscious bias. Do you want to chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, the ABCs. I think
Yeah.
the ABCs
And the DEFs.
And the DEFs. First, you have to admit it. I think I'm not biased, I'm a good person, doesn't help anyone because you're just going to be less open to seeing the mistakes that you make if you're trying to push back. So I think that's why a lot of this pushback is so toxic, because it's like we refuse to admit our very human nature in saying we don't have biases, even though we can show it. Like in the lab, we can show it all through NASA. Like we do, it's there. So start with admitting it. And it's not like I admit it and it's okay because I'm human. It's like I admit it, and the B in the ABCs is that you have to block it. So if you admit that you have it, you don't just accept it and be like, I'm biased, but you have to find ways. And if it's removing names or keeping track, block it. And then the C is count it. So measure if what you're doing is having an effect or changing things. If not, then try something else. None of these interventions, say, blinding, removing names, it doesn't work in every case. When I reviewed the literature on this before proposing it to NASA, there's cases where removing names caused greater disparities. So it's not a panacea, right? You have to reality check things that in this case, it's going to be beneficial.
And so the DEFs?
The DEFs, let's see if I can remember. Develop people. So if you're in a leadership role, I would say what makes a leader is that you are investing in the development of other people. And so ensuring that you're developing people equally. You could say equally across identity, but just equally, right? I know we have favorite employees, and I think that's also human nature. And if you are going to be a successful leader, you need to develop your people. Empower them is the E. If you want to make your life terrible as a leader, micromanage people. It makes them miserable. It makes you miserable. It's, ineffective. If you empower people and teach them how to make the decisions that matter, then they're going to perform better. If that means you perform better. And then the F is fairly treat them. So make sure that your outcomes are fair. You can look at salaries, raises, bonuses. We talked about gender disparities in leadership, but the data continue to show big disparities on pay. And even when organizations go in and do pay equity analysis, you'll still find differences on bonuses. So we find ways to create unfairness in systems, but I think fairness is like table stakes for running a business. It's like illegal not to treat people fairly across, protected class. So gender, race, religion, national origin. So you have to be fair, right? Someone can demonstrate it and take you to court. So that's the F is fair.
So we've talked about some of them, but what are the key benefits of Inclusify?
Innovation is a huge one. So hearing those diverse voices on your team, and even if it's, if your team maybe isn't particularly diverse, let's just say you don't have any women on your team, creating an inclusive environment where everyone's voice can be heard is still going to improve innovation, because as it is, if people don't feel safe to speak up, you're going to have less innovation. So performance is another one. We see differences in performance. Retention, I feel like with so many organizations I work with, they're like, well, how do we show that this is beneficial? I'm like, just run your turnover numbers and your voluntary turnover in particular. That alone, you can show the ROI of creating a more inclusive environment, because turnover is expensive. And if you're losing top talent, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you in training, rehiring, innovation, and performance. So turnover is a huge one. And then you could even take it all the way down the line to say stock prices, growth, like all of studies have shown links between diversity and inclusion and all those outcomes.
So what steps can leaders take to be more inclusifying?
Yeah. Oh, so I mean, there's like a million, right? I have an online quiz at.
I took your quiz.
Oh, good. What did it say?
Oh, I'll tell you later.
Okay. So there's an online quiz. It's free. Anyone can take it. It's at inclusifyer.com. So INCULINCUL. Okay, I can't say Inclusify.
We'll put it in the notes.
It's so funny. My daughter is doing Mary Poppins, and they're trying to spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious in the song. I'm like, why is it so hard to spell? And then I can't even spell Inclusifyer. Inclusifyer.com. It'll tell you like maybe your natural tendency or where you are now.
Yeah.
Are you really strong at supporting uniqueness? Like that is, I recognize that people are different and I value that difference. Or are you really strong at promoting belonging? I can create the esprit de corps of my team. You could be neither. You could do both a little bit in the middle, or you could be great at both. That's an Inclusifier. And then it'll give you on the quiz immediately after taking it strategies specifically tailored toward like where you are. But if I had to pick just one before I hear what your matrix scores are, I would say it's like trying to elevate people's voices in meetings. I feel like too many times people are at work, they love their job, they love what they're doing, they're kicking butt, their clients love them, and then they go into the team meeting and they're not recognized, their voice isn't heard, no one listens to what they say, and they feel terrible. They want to go find another place to work. So
yeah,
I think that's the easiest one.
That makes a lot of sense. So, and one of the quotes, one of my favorite quotes that you had in the book, can you kind of repeat that? The one about to stand out and fit in, to be me, but we. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's the idea of the uniqueness and belonging. So the belonging feeling is like, I want to be part of we, but it's human nature to also want to be different than we. We, especially, I think this is true in the US, but we appreciate individuality. So we don't all want to look the same. We want to be recognized for our difference just as much as we want to belong. And that's the magic in inclusion, is not just creating belonging by making everyone the same, but how do you make everyone feel valued, not despite their difference, but along with the fact that they're different and that their difference actually adds value.
So another side question, when you go into NASA or one of these large organizations, is it really about spending time and doing research and looking at their current numbers and then doing an analysis and then kind of parroting that back to them in terms of this is where I see the holes are and where you can improve? Or what is your process when you work with different companies?
Yeah, I think that, I love looking at the data because I think that the data tell stories
Yeah.
that are, oftentimes hard to argue with. And, oftentimes people don't know. But then I also want to talk to people because their human experience adds, it's data as well beyond the numbers. Even if you have no, pay inequity, if your female employees or employees from the LGBTQ plus community feel less valued, they're still going to leave. It doesn't matter if you're like, but you're paid equally, you can't leave. I look at the numbers. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's both, right? And I think so much of it, of creating change or change management, is it getting the powers that be, the organizational leaders, to see the value in making changes, but also the possibility. Like this, we can actually do this. This isn't impossible. We're not trying to create world peace. That would be great. And I'm probably not the right person to do that. But by looking at the data and talking to people, we can make changes. They're going to have a positive impact on your team and your company.
Great. Well, if people are interested in learning more, they obviously can read your book, Inclusify, The Power of Uniqueness and Belonging to Build Innovative Teams, which is available on Amazon, correct?
For sure. Everywhere.
And then, of course, you have two websites?
Yeah. So there's the inclusifybook.com and then there's inclusify.com.
And the inclusify.com is really more about towards the leadership training that you do, correct?
Yeah.
And taking the test.
And you're going to have to tell me what your Inclusify scores are. You don't want to share them with the world.
No, I can, but when I think I was gonna, I read before I took it that you said that most people don't have a high, automatically Inclusify isn't their number one score.
Yes.
So my Inclusify score was 34%.
That's good, right?
I don't know. I don't know. I was surprised that I think I'm more on the shepherd
Oh,
side.
yeah, yeah.
So what does that mean?
Okay, so shepherds are promoting uniqueness. They definitely value diversity and the difference that people bring.
Yeah.
And, or it's but I'm gonna say and the benefit for you would be focusing more on how to create cohesiveness on your teams because for everyone to feel included, like everyone has to be brought to the table. And so sometimes shepherds and white knights, the people who are really like, we want to focus on diversity, are leaving out majority group members. And that's where we get that backlash, right? Like
Meaning white males is what you
in the US, let's say, yes,
okay.
we're talking in most, like if you're talking about
so there were several questions about white males, and
yeah.
I probably definitely had a different answer.
Yeah.
Others might have on that in terms of
Yeah, I
preference.
feel like I foretold the future in Inclusify because it came out in 2020, and I'm like, if we put forth this effort to create an inclusive environment, but we don't support white men in this process, they're going to quit too, or they're going to backlash. And then I'm like, oh
Right.
man, we have the backlash. So,
And that is a challenge to make sure that they're engaged and they want to be a part of it and they're motivated to be a part of it.
yeah. And I think a lot of,
without them feeling threatened by it.
you got it. Yeah. And it's like, this is what I say to sometimes, shepherds and say, well, why is that my responsibility? And I'm like, well, why is it the white man manager's responsibility to make the women feel included?
Interesting.
Maybe it's because it's the right thing to do, but it's also just good leadership.
Yeah.
If you're not bringing everyone along with you and you're making some people, right or wrong, doesn't matter if they're right or wrong, feel like they don't have an opportunity to be successful, then like there's something that you have the opportunity to change to make your whole team more successful.
So everyone should go to inclusifyer.com to take that test, the Inclusify leadership quiz, correct? And then you'll know what we're talking about.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Stefanie. It was a fantastic conversation. I learned a lot, and I highly recommend the book for anyone who is interested in learning more about the topic.
Thanks, Kelly. I love your podcast.